Afternoon, everyone. My name is Henry Chang. I'm the Executive Director of the Fatty Liver Foundation. We're so excited that you can join us this afternoon for this community conversation where we'll be talking about integrating the patient's voice into mass drug development. Before I begin, I just would like to welcome my colleagues who are going to be introducing themselves. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So these are our disclosures. Next. So I'd like to turn this over to Edith from the Liver Forum, who will kind of give all of you a quick overview of the Forum for Collaborative Research and the work of the Liver Forum and how its relation to the PEDDLE working group that we'll be talking with you today. Edith?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Henry, and thank you for having me. So my name is Edith Dwyer, and I'm a research associate with the Forum for Collaborative Research, and I work on the Liver Forum and the PSC Forum. Just to give a quick overview of the Forum for Collaborative Research. So we are a public-private partnership, and we operate under the University of California, Berkeley School of Public Health. This organization has been working to advance regulatory science and policy issues for over 20 years, and we are led by our executive director, Dr. Veronica Miller. Next slide, please. So the Liver Forum is one of multiple topic areas that we have. So this is a platform for multi-stakeholder engagement and dialogue. We prioritize research and identifying solutions to accelerate therapeutic development in MASLD and MASH. So this graphic here gives a pretty good idea of how we are organized. We involve regulatory agencies, industry partners, patient and community groups, academic and clinical partners, as well as academic societies. And the main work that we do is to provide a neutral, independent, safe space for discussion and deliberation across these various stakeholder groups. So the main focus is on developing consensus, increasing collaboration, and reducing duplication. The working groups have ongoing activities throughout the year, and we're anchored by larger in-person meetings a few times a year. And we encourage active and engaged participation from all of our stakeholders. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a moment to thank our Liver Forum sponsors. So all of these organizations that are on the screen help to support our working groups and projects that we contribute to throughout the year. And we really appreciate, again, the active and engaged participation from all of our Liver Forum members. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Edith. I'll just spend a couple minutes talking about the PEDDLE working group, which, as Edith mentioned, is being supported by the Liver Forum. So PEDDLE stands for Patient Engagement in Drug Development Leading Through Example. Our purpose is to emphasize the important role of patient insights in designing effective and patient-centric MASH clinical trials, but also identify ways where we can meaningfully and truly integrate patient perspective into mass drug development processes, ensuring that the outcome and the results are meeting the needs of the patient community. Next slide. So the goals of the PEDDLE working group is to develop best practices and guidance for patient engagement. And you'll be hearing more later from my colleague Rose, who will be providing you an update on some of the progress that we have made recently. We are creating practical tools and resources with and for all stakeholders. That includes our industry partners, certainly academia and regulators involved in mass drug development to facilitate patient involvement and integration into that workflow. And lastly, is to identify, overcome barriers to patient engagement. Next. So this slide, as you can see, that all of this work would not be made possible without the support of the multi-stakeholders, as shown on this slide, that could include not only industry partners, but also leading patient advocacy organizations. Next. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this over to my industry co-chair, Rosemary Salati from Regeneron, who will walk you through some of the progress that we have made recently, and then we'll open up for a Q&A. Rose?
So thank you, Henry, and thank you, Edith. My name is Rose Salati. I am the patient advocacy lead at Regeneron for our obesity and our liver disease portfolio, but I am a scientist by training. And so I spent about 15 years doing basic research and drug development before transitioning into the world of patient advocacy. So I can say that both from a scientist perspective, a drug hunter perspective, and an advocacy perspective, I see so much value in this working group as well as what we're trying to accomplish. So, as a scientist, and Henry will definitely be able to empathize with this as well, as a scientist himself, we wanted to work on this resource center and action items in a very systematic and data-driven way. And so, in order to lay a proper foundation to the work that we were doing, we did a very thorough landscape assessment to map out the key engagement points across phase 2 and phase 3 clinical development, where patient engagement and patient input would add value. We also mapped the patient and advocate contributions alongside current industry standards. And just as importantly, we aligned all of this with milestones that existed within regulatory and clinical guidance and workflows. We did a very expansive literature audit to assess the impact and value and precedent of early and patient engagement across 12 therapeutic areas, from oncology to rare disease, inclusive of cardiometabolic disease. We identified and linked cost savings and accelerated development timelines to early patient engagement. And we also were able to collect case studies where patient input improved treatment design and outcomes. So that we weren't reinventing the wheel, we also looked at existing tools and frameworks to implement early patient engagement. We did an audit and looked at credible organizations like PCORI, UPADI, and the FNIH. We looked at stakeholder involvement and where they integrated patient input into the drug development process, and how they work to integrate that in an official way into SOPs and guidance documents. We also evaluated the usability, the adaptability, and the scalability of some of these frameworks across different company sizes and different engagement maturity levels. On the next slide, I'll show you a little bit of what we are proposing in terms of what a resource center for early patient engagement tools could look like. We are thinking of having a static picture or diagram that would be housed on the Liver Forum website. This could potentially be a schematic of the drug development timeline, where you could have specific milestones in that schematic where we already know early patient engagement would add value. We're thinking this schematic could include an interactive element, where there will be clickable elements where you could click on it to get to additional resources. The current thinking is that we could have documents such as a checklist that would be a concise and actionable tool to enable consistent planning, development, and execution. Clickable elements that could potentially take you to guidance documents that could further define how to do these activities, references, templates, and linked tools. And then again, just to highlight the fact that we want to make this as user-friendly as possible for both patients and professionals by making it interactive. And I would like to stress that this is not a novel idea per se. There is precedent for this as well. If we go to the next slide, This is an example of an interactive tool that we have developed between Regeneron and a council that we have hosted for over 3 years now, called the MASH Power Council, Patient Organizations Who Empower Results. So this is a standing council, which I'll highlight later in the Q&A, that we interact with to help us identify where the pain points are in the overall patient journey, as well as aspects of our clinical development program that really need and could value and benefit from patient input. We developed a very detailed patient journey schematic that we adapted into an interactive tool, which is what you see on the screen here. This interactive tool has clickable elements where when you click on that icon, it will take you to additional resources and information about that point in the journey, whether it's guidelines, whether it's clinical trial education, or whether it's access to materials to write letters to the FDA. On the next slide, there's also an example here that I provide from the American Association of Clinical Endocrinology. They have several interactive tools on their website that are shown here. The hyperlinks are also at the bottom of the slide, so you can go into them at your leisure. But as you can see, these schematics actually have clickable elements in them. And so when you click on one of these icons, it takes you to additional information and resources. So again, just from a user perspective, making a static schematic very interactive and user-friendly. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about the value that a resource center and these types of tools might have from a regulatory perspective. So this resource center is more than just an advocacy tool. It really becomes this bridge between the patient lived experience and the regulatory science. Right now, we're at this inflection point in drug development, and this shift is one where the clearest of examples of why patient partnership matters, right? The FDA recently had a communication on non-invasive tests as reasonably likely surrogate endpoints. And this signals a turning point, I think, for all of us. For decades, the biopsy has been the gold standard, and it comes at a high cost, not only to patients, both physically, emotionally, and physically, but also from a industry perspective and a regulatory perspective, there's high cost as well. Fewer invasive procedures means less fear, less disruption, and less recovery time from a patient perspective. Lower burden means trials become more accessible to more people, especially those who are historically underrepresented. When trials are reflective of communities, the science gets stronger, the data gets better, and the trust increases. So this shift has the potential to really reduce barriers for working families, for rural populations, older adults, and communities that may mistrust the medical system because participation no longer requires the same degree of physical risk and logistical disruption. In other words, better science, better care, and broader participation can happen all at the same time. If we go to the next slide, so we saw on the previous slide that science really opens the door for more patient-centered trial approaches through non-invasive endpoints. But now we have to ensure that access through that door is equitable, intentional, and protected. Right now, the regulatory environment is shifting, to say the least. The FDA recently withdrew the draft diversity action plan in August of 2025. And there's a little uncertainty about officializing and integrating diversity into clinical trials. That uncertainty introduces practical risk, practical and philosophical risk. There's a real possibility that trial populations may drift back towards convenience rather than representativeness. When trials don't reflect real communities, the data becomes less generalizable, less trustworthy, and ultimately less usable for the people who rely on that data and those medicines. So this lack of representation is not a compliance issue, it's a care issue, it's a quality issue, and it's a trust issue. And we feel that developing this resource center will enable an easier way to actually embrace and integrate all populations and ethnicities and rural populations into the clinical development process. On the next slide, I just want to give you a sense for, as we're advancing forward in this working group, what we're thinking about in terms of short-term next steps. First, we are drafting a peer-reviewed manuscript to establish scientific rationale for structured patient partnership in drug development. So this is more than just publishing. It's about creating a durable foundation that's grounded in lived experience, advancing models for engagement, and positioning PEDDLE as a credible and scalable approach for the field. Second, we launched a community survey to Liver Forum members and working group members to pressure test our approach and to ensure that what we build is practical, adaptable, and impactful. The survey looks at 4 key areas: toolkit design, existing frameworks, real-world barriers, which we'll get into in just a second, and strategies for uptake and awareness. We've already received more than 2 dozen, I think 3 dozen responses, which include both quantitative insights as well as qualitative feedback that will directly integrate into our iteration of this resource center. So together, these 2 work streams, if you will, ensure that PEDDLE is both evidence-based and community-led. A model that's not just insightful, but usable, trusted, and built to last. So with that, I will thank you for your time. I'll pass it back to Edith, who I think will facilitate a little bit of a Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rose, and thank you, Henry, as well for your presentations. That was a great overview of the PEDDLE working group. So I have a few questions here, and then anybody who is on the Zoom, if you have questions, you can feel free to put that in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that. So just to start, in addressing the goal of balancing scientific rigor and lived experience of patients, how can the PEDDLE Resource Center be integrated into the industry workflows? So what do you think that looks like, and what might be some barriers to implementation? I think I can go to Rose first for that question.
You know, I think one of the biggest barriers that I see really to integration is the resource constraints, both financial and operational. Integrating these tools into already complex clinical development programs, it takes time, it takes staffing, it takes sustained investment. I think without some dedicated funding and clear prioritization, sometimes these efforts can lose a little momentum. And I think that's why it's so critical to have a strong advocate and to have leadership support. I think for me, another challenge might be the drug development processes and the SOPs. They're often very rigid, right? So introducing patient engagement that sometimes can seem like a nice to have requires it to be demonstrated scientifically why it's so important and validated so that it can be included in these clinical and regulatory workflows. And again, I think something like that does take a little bit of time and effort, but with the proper advocacy and leadership support can definitely be done.
Wonderful. Henry, did you want to respond to that one as well?
Yeah, I think thank you, Rose, for offering the industry perspective, and certainly from the patient perspective, we believe that patient engagement is foundational to the success in drug development. But recognizing some of the current challenges and barrier that Rose had highlighted, I think one potential area we could certainly encourage the study sponsors to consider is to invite patient advocates early on in your drug development process, including be able to sit in and participate meaningfully at study investigators meeting. Just want to give one example. I've been, as a patient advocate, only been invited once to a investigators meeting for a ongoing phase 3 MAST trial. It would just really open up a lot of possibility in my view where patients can really provide not only the real world experience, but also identify opportunities for improved communications between the study site personnel and those patients already enrolled in this particular clinical trial as a way to enhance retention rate. I think those are the kind of things that we often don't hear about unless we have the opportunity to set the table at an investigators meeting. So that could be one area that we can work on. I think the second area, this is something that's well documented in the medical literature, well, we know that early patient engagement in drug development leads to fewer protocol amendments, and that translates into millions in not only cost savings, but also, time and effort. And I think we can all agree that we all want to see these trials run, in a way that gives us the best chance of bringing these innovative treatment to the market to benefit patient. So I would point to those resources, and we'd be happy to also share them with all of the participants if you like to, look into those studies further. But there's certainly lots of precedent, as Rose mentioned. These are some of the best practices that we'll be integrating into our resource center.
Wonderful. So I think kind of going along that same line, we've heard of the very early engagement of the patients in the clinical trial, really bringing in the patient voice to positively impact these trials. I was wondering if you could maybe give us a few more examples of how the PEDDLE Resource Center could directly address the aim of translating the insights and patient experience into protocol changes. So what might that look like, and how might the PEDDLE Resource Center be of assistance in that?
So is it okay if I start?
Yes.
So I referenced the MASH Power Council earlier. This is a Regeneron-led council of patient organizations who empower results, which is what POWER stands for. And we over 3 years ago, we originally convened this council just to answer one specific question. And I think what we realized through that discussion is that these advocates and patients in the broader community have so much more to add to us understanding the lived experience and now to design strategies and trials with real people in mind. We've been convening this council for over 3 years, and we have gained substantial insights that have changed our clinical strategy, and more importantly, have been instrumental in shaping our trial design, as well as any of the patient-facing materials that we have developed, inclusive of our website, and some MOA videos, mechanism of action videos, educational brochures. And something that we're working on now is a newsletter series for trial participants to leverage at specific points in their clinical experience where they need education or they need support, especially in these biopsy-required trials. So this council has been instrumental in helping us really refine our interactions with the broader community and has fostered recruitment and hopefully will foster retention as well. For me, I think these standing councils have been instrumental. One of the reasons I'm so excited and passionate about this project is because this really will create tools, templates, and resources for others in the industry and on the nonprofit side to do things a little bit easier right, than what I had to go through to get this council up and running for one term, let alone 3. So I think, by standardizing some of what I've done and what others done, we move from ad hoc patient feedback to something that is repeatable, evidence informed, and really meaningful, humane, and effective.
That's great, Rose. Just to build on the wonderful example you gave, Rose, about the MASH Power Council, but I think from the patient advocacy perspective, I would offer a relatively new program that the Fatty Liver Foundation had launched. It's called the Dr. Stephen Harrison Patient Advocacy Fellowship. This is named after, I think many of you know, Dr. Harrison, who is probably one of the most prolific clinical investigators when it comes to mass drug development. And he was very, uh, you know, uh, active in engaging with patients to provide input in trial design. In fact, I had the honor of working with him on a phase 2 trial design for a mass treatment. So we decided to create this patient advocacy fellowship in honor of his legacy. So the fellowship really is aiming to equip up to 20 fellows from North America and also EU on making sure that they have access to the latest information on clinical trial design for MASH, but also the current regulatory document governing the development of MASH treatment. And ultimately, we'd like to have these fellow be fully integrated, working alongside with study sponsor, but also with the regulatory body to ensure that the patient live experience is embedded early on, starting in phase 2, all the way to phase 3 and post-marketing. We think this is something that has already been demonstrated, certainly in the HIV space, where I spent the last 25 years, where we witnessed the impact of patient advocacy, active engagement in trial design. And as I mentioned earlier, there's also various examples where if you engage patients early on, not only that's going to inform the way that you implement, but also has great potential to enhance patient retention and ultimately give you the data that could also be helpful from a real world perspective, how your product will be used in different subpopulations.
Great. Thank you very much. I think those are really great, clear, and very impactful examples of the impact of patient engagement and the various groups that are working towards that as well. Very exciting stuff. So I have one more question, and it is a pretty big one as well. Can you tell us about how important it is to build trust and transparency across the stakeholder groups who are involved in clinical trials and some actions towards that? So I think we can start on the advocacy side with Henry and then maybe go to Rose next for the industry perspective.
Absolutely. That is such a sort of the glue, if you will, in terms of not only forming partnerships, but also sustaining them. I think in terms of building trust from the lens of the patient advocacy community, one, it's about bringing the patient advocate to the table in a very meaningful, intentional way. So what I mean by that is that this is not a nice to have sort of checklist, as Rose may have mentioned. It requires reciprocity, but also requires a lot of transparency. I would even say that, how study sponsors and also study site personnel communicate with the patient is something that is often overlooked. Communication is something that is certainly a soft skill. I have witnessed the power of really strong communication, effective communication between study personnel and the trial participant that really contributed to enhance retention. So I think communication is real key in this, but just also setting up structural way to engage the patient community, right? The example that Rose gave, Match Power Council, is certainly one shining example, and there are a few others out there where we are actively not only engaging with the company, but specifically getting real-time feedback from those people who are designing the trial and conducting the trial at the company.
Wonderful. And I think Rose, back over to you for the more industry perspective on this building trust and transparency.
Yeah. So, for me on the industry side, I am that bridge internally across multiple disciplines that are part of a drug development team to the external community, patient and professional organizations. And building trust and transparency are foundational, both internally for me as well as externally. Within my organization, teams need to understand why people with lived experience need to be at the table. Similar to what Henry had shared, this is not a symbolic gesture, but this is a strategic driver of better science, more feasible protocols, and stronger outcomes. So when internal teams trust the process, right, and sometimes it takes work, and going back to what Henry had shared in terms of communication, the what's in it for me, why medical affairs should understand the lived experience and the barriers to, access, why clinical development teams need to understand the logistical and financial challenges of participating in a clinical trial, what matters to them, why it's so important, is where I start to get those types of opportunities. And then quickly thereafter, it becomes very easy because they see, the value very quickly. Externally, trust must be built through established community partners. Patient organizations have already earned the credibility, they've navigated the stigma, and they carry the confidence that people we hope will participate in trials have. So when industry shows up consistently and honestly and with a clear purpose, then we shift from this transactional engagement to something that's a little bit more genuine. And that's where trust moves from being a concept to becoming the very infrastructure that enables participation and retention, shared learning, and ultimately better care for the communities that we all serve.
Wonderful. I think that was definitely a great answer on that one. So just a few more questions, and I think I can hand this one to Rose next. So we've talked about the resource center, what it's going to involve, and we have lots of great ideas as well as lots of great feedback coming through the survey and our Liver Forum members and the working group members who are giving us information on that. So I wanted to kind of talk about what we've said about how to implement the resource and how can we help our industry partners and people in the companies actually implement this into workflows. So I was wondering if Rose, you could sort of speak to how we're trying to think about that, what factors need to be considered, how do we try to target the right people to see this and make it kind of understandable and workable for them.
Well, I'll start with the right people. So you need to have a representative internally that is doing the actual work, be a champion. But then it's very, very critical to have leadership endorsement. So, we're very blessed that our leadership is very supportive of bringing people with lived experience to the table earlier, as you can see from the council that we've held for years and years. When leaders endorse the importance of patient engagement, then these tools and integrating them become, part of corporate responsibilities, right? And they're that much easier to integrate into practice. And it signals to the broader teams that patient engagement is not just an option, but really a central way to do science. The second thing that I'll point out is the importance of building a strong marketing and communication plan. I think more often than not, we build something that we know is impactful, but we don't share it in the right way, right? Either through the right channels or through the right people. So effective marketing and communication may start with meeting stakeholders where they are, leveraging maybe key scientific conferences or patient summits. Advocacy-led events probably ensures that these tools are a little bit more visible from an industry and a community perspective. And then patient advocacy channels are, especially powerful in creating awareness and uptake. So I would say those are the two things that I really think we need from an industry perspective to really make sure that this resource center and any tools we develop are in the hands of the people that need them.
Wonderful. Henry, did you have anything to add about the implementation and how we kind of are thinking about that going forward?
Yeah, I think Rose said it very well. You really have to begin by identifying the right, leadership person. And I would just give a recent example where I had the opportunity to participate in an R&D roundtable that was designed specifically to engage the patient community hosted by Madrigal Pharmaceuticals. And it's really refreshing to be able to sit in the room with all of the key decision makers not only on the current treatment that's in the market, but also individual who are overseeing principal investigator initiated study, post-marketing surveillance, really help us better understand what we can impact and provide input into those processes. And what made it truly remarkable is that that was not a one-off meeting. We were given the opportunity to have continuous feedback with the team, in this case at Madrigal, and as we think about, other opportunity where we can impact on the trial design, there's that ongoing dialogue, which I think it's really, really critical, going back to what we're talking about building trust and ensuring that the patient's voice is fully integrated.
Great. Thank you very much. So this one might go to Henry first, and then I'll pass it over to Rose again. So I was wondering if you could speak to what do you think that it looks like to have early, consistent patient engagement to become the standard? So not as a nice to have, as a standard expectation for everybody. So what do you think that looks like? You can respond either how to get there, how do we know when we've reached that point? How do you sort of envision that?
Well, that's where this resource center come into play from the PEDDLE working group. It's ultimately comes down to uh, evidence-driven design, right? So we need to continue to generate evidence from various forms of patient engagement, whether it be the council, R&D roundtable meeting, and those will inform us how best to support our industry partners, work to integrate patient engagement into their workflow. I think there are examples I cited already on the importance of early engagement and how that translates into cost saving, i.e., reductions in protocol amendments. Those data points are already out there, and I hope that the industry partners will look at those as incentives, if you will, to not only engage with us, but also just doing the right thing.
Great.
Edith, this is a loaded question. I anticipate that success is going to look very messy. I think it's going to look very messy in the beginning, and I think we have to be determined to take that organized chaos and put it into something a little bit more uh, constellation-like, if you will. So I anticipate, what we're doing with this working group is really making sure that we understand all of the existing tools that we could potentially use as a straw man, as framework. And then we have to assume this is going to be an iterative process. We want to build framework that is flexible across companies that are focusing on pharmaceuticals versus devices and diagnostics, as well as companies that might be big or small. So I think this is going to take time. It's going to be a little bit messy in the beginning, but I think we have to make sure that we are capturing the data as we go, and we are listening to what works and what doesn't, and refining in the appropriate way. And I think Henry hit the nail on the head. We are building this plan with metrics in mind. So I think we will learn which metrics to collect, whether it's number of councils that have been held, number of changes that have been made to the trial design, whether it's more qualitative in terms of feedback from people that are participating in IE councils. But I think this is going to be a process, and I think Henry, myself, and the other founding chair of the working group, Michael Battelle from the Fatty Liver Alliance, are committed to get things going. And I think one of the things we're leaning on is the broader working group and the broader community, hence this survey, to make sure that we are testing all of the different things that we need to test to get there.
Great, very exciting. And I have one last question for both of you. You can decide who takes this one first, but I just wanted to ask, going forward, what are you most excited about with the PEDDLE working group? What's up next?
I guess I'll start. I'm most excited about, as I spent the last couple of days here at the liver meeting, that there's increasing recognition on the importance of integrating patients' voice in clinical trial design. And I have had some very good discussions with industry partners. They've expressed strong interest in joining this effort. So this is more of a call to action for those of you who are participating or watching this video, that we are certainly inviting you to join us and share your experience in support of patient engagement and drug development.
I am just overall a very excited and happy person. But 3 years ago, I've been going to the Liver Forum meetings, which are held twice a year for years. And I started to see increasingly more representatives from the patient community attend these forums, and their contributions be that much more meaningful. Fast forward a couple of years, we have the approval of resmetirom. Now we have Wegovy. So now I think, and we have precedent from a industry from a government perspective for the value and impact of early patient engagement. I mean, when you put all of these together, it just makes so much sense that the time is now. Okay, and it's not just myself, it's not just Henry, it's not just Michael that think this. If you go back to the companies that were represented on the slide that are participating in this working group, you can see that everybody sees the value that this could potentially have. So I think we're armed for success. I think I am very, very excited to see, where we can take this in the next year. I want to make sure that I control my excitement, and we do this in a very evidence-based and thoughtful way. This manuscript is going to be very foundational to take everything that we know as a working group and the Liver Forum and share this more broadly with the community. And then, as we start to build this framework and to test pilot this in companies, we'll be able to really refine it so that by the time we have something to offer more broadly, we have the highest opportunity for success. So I am just excited all around for not only what we're doing, why we're doing it, but how we're doing it too.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all of your questions. I mean, for your answers and your insights on that. And I think I will pass it back to Henry for some closing remarks.
Well, I just want to thank again Edith and Dr. Veronica Miller for your partnership at the Liver Forum, and of course my co-chair Rose and Mike Patel, who unfortunately couldn't join us. He's been a strong leader from the patient community at the Fatty Liver Alliance. So I wanted to thank all of you for taking time off on your busy schedule at the liver meeting to participate in this community conversation. A recording of this session will be made available on the Fatty Liver Foundation website. So we hope that you will help us to further amplify the messages that we just conveyed to you this afternoon. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your time at the liver meeting.